Hello everyone, I'm Lydia Ruth. Welcome to the Mints and to another homemaking broadcast where you can listen while you work. And today is the fourth episode of Girls Please Stay Home. And many of us who are vital can tell you what the snags will be if you go out there to work outside the home and all the advantages of being home. And today I'm going to ask you first, those of you who are new here, please click the link in the description and go to the blog on which I have embedded this video so that you can see the links and the other things that I've spoken of in the lesson. And I like to pretend I'm homeschooling you because homeschooling is such a joy, and we vital people, we never quit, do we? We just keep learning and we keep doing. And I do have a couple of poems to read to you. So I will begin by reading this poem called The Younger Generation. If you're a girl and you are listening to this with your mother, and then here is a vital lesson or some subject for you to consider. If you are older than anyone in your family, someone else in your family, all of us are older than someone. Even if you're 15, you're still older than someone. And so you need to listen to this because this applies to anyone who has got a little wisdom about life and knows to teach the younger ones not to, touch the hot stove or stray too far or lose something or whatever. So I want to just read this to you. It was written in the 1940s, I believe, by Edgar A. Guest, and it's called The Younger Generation. This younger generation seems to mock at all our preaching, to want to build its house of dreams without our wiser teaching. It looks at us with cool disdain and scorns the hints we are giving. We've lived, of course, but all in vain. What do we know of living? We are the killjoys of the place who cry, "Beware of strangers, sin lurks behind the smiling face, the streets are full of dangers." So, poor old fogies that we are, we sit with fingers drumming, the pale, despairing ma and pa, who dread what next is coming. Ah, well, one time at council wise, we sneered in youth's elation. We scorned the old who would advise to seek our own salvation. So why should we grow sorely vexed, or trouble seek to borrow? They'll be the killjoys of the next glad age, which starts tomorrow. The good advice they're heeding not, they'll soon be giving, and hear their children wonder what they know of life and living. Isn't that the truth? So, of course, I expect the usual mocking, and I do get it sometimes from some of the things I have said when I speak of this radical notion of keeping your daughters at home where they can develop better and have more freedom. There's no freedom. You think you're going to leave home and you're going to have so much freedom. Pretty soon it becomes a terrible restriction. And you're not going to be able to wander through the house when you feel like and pick up a book you love or sit down and watch a movie you want to any time of day. Your time now belongs to someone else once you incarcerate yourself in their institution. And so I'm going to read one more poem for you. Those of you who are of the vital years, I am going to read this because I identify as 16, and I also have been euthanized. My children don't like me to use that word, but I couldn't think of a better one. Euthanized, meaning I have still got the 16-year-old excitement about learning some things and doing some things. And when they come to see me and the grandchildren are here and they know something, I say, let's have a little session where you tell me something and I'll tell you something. And so each one has to come with something to read, to tell, to show, to explain. So we have Homeschool Revisited. And we're all grown up now. All my children are approaching 50, and the grandchildren are now entering their 20s. And so it's just so refreshing to have them come and show me something And I say, I've done all this work at the manse. I've made your little hotel rooms, and I've turned this into an inn, and the least you can do is come and share something with me and show me something, or tell me how to do something, or share something you have read. And so to elevate the mind, you have to come. Your job now is to edify me. I have edified you all these years, and now you come back and you start to show an interest in my life and edify me back. So show me something, read me something, bring an interesting thing, and I'll do my part too. And today, this is what I'm going to read to you, and it's for everybody, but particularly the vital, because God has a future and a hope for us too. And it's called old age, unfortunately. I wish he had chosen a different, I think he should have called it vitality. You know why we say that, don't you? Because all of our vitals are still working. And if you know what they are, we're breathing, maybe barely, but we're breathing, and our blood is flowing, and we're able to still function. So here it is. It's called old age. I used to think that growing old was reckoned just in years. I need to stop. I can never read anything without thinking of something I need to say. I remember thinking how nice it would be to be in my 60s and sit in a rocking chair and knit, because when I was really young, that's what the old people did. That's what the old women did. They sat in rocking chairs and they knit to their heart's content. I haven't been able to sit down since I have reached those vital years, and so I haven't been able to sit and knit. But listen to this. I used to think that growing old was reckoned just in years, but who can name the very date when weariness appears? I find no stated time when man, obedient to a law, must settle in an easy chair and from the world withdraw. Old age is rather curious, or so it seems to me. I know old men at 40 and young men at 73. I'm done with counting life by years or temples turning gray. No man is old who wakes with joy to greet another day. What if the body cannot dance with youth's elastic spring? There's many a vibrant interest to which the mind can cling. 'Tis in the spirit age must dwell, or this would never be. I know old men at 40 and young men at 73. Some men keep all their friendships warm and welcome friendships new. They have no time to sit and mourn the things they used to do. This changing world they greet with joy and never bow to fate. On every fresh adventure they set out with hearts elate. From chilling fear and bitter dread they keep their spirits free. While some seem old at 40, they stay young at 73. So much to do, so much to learn, so much in which to share. With twinkling eyes and minds alert, some brave both time and care. And this I've learned from other men, that only they are old who think with something that has passed the tale of life is told. For age is not alone of time. We should never see men old and bent at 40 and men young at 73. Yes, of course. And even when my children were at home and I was homeschooling them, I noticed that the youth of the prevailing culture started to look and act old. They had a sour outlook on life. They lived as though there was no hope, and all they could think of was instant relief with vice of some kind. Very, very young people, and they weren't interested in color. Walk around wearing black all the time and just being non-identifiable. And I just thought to myself, it is sad to see the youth lose the bloom of youth. As we talked about before, there was no sparkle in their eyes. But the one thing that homeschooling did for me and the children is it did give us an interest in life, a fervent interest in life. So I'm going to read also from 2 John, the Apostle John. I rejoiced greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. So this is our role right now. This is our role right now. is to coach you along and keep you walking in the truth. We don't bring up our children just to let them go. We check on them. We want to see what the results of our harvest are, and we want to see them walking in truth. And that's why we caution them, and that's why we say things. And there have been many complaints about previous elderly generations that just sat passively by and watched people make mistakes when they could have helped them or could have said something. But I think that many times we vital people are pushed away and run down by saying something, and then we start to retreat. And it reminds me of the early days of blogging, when a lot of really nice women had beautiful blogs on homemaking, and there was an attack by many haters on their blogs, and also mocking them and deriding them and stealing their content. And so these homemakers just lost their desire to do it anymore, because you can only take so much, and it's really sad. But we also have an obligation to tell the truth, and whether or not it's accepted, I guess, doesn't matter. We can practice. So I wanted to talk more about how young ladies at home, how this came about, where I would say, daughters, please stay home. Well, back in the day, and particularly you can read about it in here, is that women would stay with their homes, their fathers and mothers, until they got married, and then they'd move into their husband's home and they'd build a life together. And they didn't have that in-between time, which was invented possibly, I would say, shortly after the Victorian era, after the death of Queen Victoria, or maybe during that era where young girls were there was a big pull to get the young girls out of the homes and into the factories, and then to live in an independent life and to pay rent to somebody. And so then when I say, well, young women need to be home with their parents until they get married, that's based on what I have seen in history and in Scripture, and even here in the U.S. It was only, I would say, 50 years ago, people were still doing that, and they still believed in it, and their daughters wanted to stay home until they got married, and the parents helped them set up their next life, their new home, and they were greatly rewarded for doing that. That is one thing we need to think about, too, if you want your daughter to stay home, and it means enough to you to say, if you won't go out to work, and you'll stay and serve your family and be a blessing to all of us, then we will help you when you get ready to get married and have your own home. We will help you to furnish your home, to help you maybe buy a home, just whatever you can do to help them stay away from the lure of the common culture. It's always been there to lure the girls out of their homes. And you can watch old movies based on old books and stories of young women who had to go out to work because they had no one to support them, or their father had died, or there was some kind of unpleasantness. And then there's also the ones that were kind of lured out of their home, and you're property to other people. You don't realize that you're a labor force to other people, that they don't really love you or care about you. If they did, they wouldn't want you to go and labor for them. They would just offer you a home or something like that. And so let me read some of my notes about this, because it was only, in my opinion, recently in the U.S. that I knew girls who did not want to go to work and wanted to get married, and would express it in the high school classes when sometimes the conversation was led by these liberal teachers, to try to sway people's opinion about the family and the home. The only thing that stands in the way of a totalitarian government controlling people and the devil destroying the family is these young people staying home until they get married. They have to get them out and then change their minds about things, whether it's in a college or whether it's at work or in some other circumstances. And you may think, girls, that you can leave and it won't matter, that you will never change, but that is not true. And you are not prepared for the things that the world is going to throw at you. There are people that will tell you, well, now, when you're little, your mother and dad have to guide you, and they'll tell you, right from wrong. But now that you're over 16, 17, or 18, you need to go out and experience this and experience the hard knocks of life, and then learn to defend them. But what the problem is that none of us, even those of us who are vital, are trained in the Army enough to have a defense. For that's one reason we're home, is to keep that away, to keep that battle out of our lives. That the only battle we should fight is to train up our children and to have a happy home and help develop the destiny of all of our family and into peace and love and into Christ. So you need to stay home and prepare for a future home. And I told you about that in the previous video where I said take over the home. Have the girls in the family take over the home. Take turns taking over the home, and then take turns for different tasks for a week. And I remember one girl that told me that when it was her job to clean the bathroom, she didn't like the job, but she decided after a couple of times that she was going to have to make it fun, so the way and make it more pleasant to do, so she could get through it without despair. And she said that she just started to do an extra, going beyond the second mile, extra and above what was necessary to make it beautiful. And she said she was the best at that. And when she was finished with the bathroom, it looked like something in a magazine or a hotel room. It was just perfect. And she also added, beauty to it and finishing touches. And that's the way to handle some of these undesirable jobs, is to do them extra special. Everyone that I've talked to that has been at home for a while has said that the best way to get rid of the creepy house syndrome, we call it the creepy house syndrome around here, where it's just kind of eerie and you get restless, you want to get out and go somewhere, is to clean it. And once you start cleaning it, you start to enjoy it and start to relax and start to settle in. And so prepare for your future home, girls, and start making things for your hope chest. And hopefully your dad may build you a cedar chest, or you'll find some other thing that you can use, maybe grandmother's old trunk, and start making things, quilts and knitted things and other things that you might. I know a lady that decided to get into ceramics, so she went to the ceramic shop and she brought home ceramics that she could finish and take back to go into the kiln, and then she'd bring them home and paint them. She didn't even have to go to a class. And she said she made herself a set of, I don't know, canisters or something like that for her home, for her future home. Now, you may not use all those things, but I also know a lady that made baby clothes by hand stitching soft flannel together. She said she didn't use them by the time her babies were born. She felt that they were probably too old. They'd been in the trunk a long time, but at least she did it, and she made a little baby wardrobe. And she let her children have it to play with their dolls later on. There are so many things that you can do, and you start building that hope chest. You can get books on thrift books and Amazon on how to fill a hope chest. Once you begin that, there's not going to be time to want to go somewhere and waste hours and hours and hours of your life working for someone else. You could help someone in their shop, or you could help someone in their business, but the only thing you're going to have to show for it is the time spent and the money. And there are so many other ways to use your time. So also, when you leave home, you have deprived your family of one part. It's like a big stage, and everyone has their part. But when the lead actor or participator or performer leaves, then everybody else has to come in and do their job, and it's just not the same. Of course, everybody will adjust, But if you can possibly, if it's not too terribly miserable at home, you should stay. For one thing, girls, you're going to have your monthly problems, physically, and you're going to need to go lay down. And yet, when you are employed outside the home, that won't be considered at all. And so you need to take care of your health. When you go out away from home to work with a group outside of your family, you're more susceptible to the illnesses and the colds that are passed around there. Now at home, our bacteria is kind of interchangeable, and we can live in the same house, breathe the same air without it being so contagious. But most of the time when a family gets sick, somebody has brought it home from somewhere else. And so another thing that you can do, girls, if you want to stay home, is become an expert in something at home. Whether it's learning how ingredients interact with each other, or making your own breads and becoming an expert at it. Everybody have an expert part of homemaking, and that is so important, because once you become an expert at it, then that will interest you in becoming an expert at other things. One thing that will happen when you go out to work, if you go out to work, is you're subjected to awful conversation, just this idle, shallow talk that goes on all the time. People used to say back in the day that, if a woman went to work, it would be more intelligent than staying home and talking about recipes and babies. But when you have ever gone, let's say the dollar store, you have ever had to go get something at the dollar store, and it's mostly women working there, even though men want jobs. I believe that sometimes the men just get tired of the talking that goes on and the ridiculous they always have to talk and laugh. I don't think I could have a job like that where you always have to talk. And of course, there's the normal talking to the customers, which you have to repeat the same stuff over and over. I bet sometimes they wish they could just push a button and it would say thank you, have a good day. But if you've ever been to some place that you have to go to do business and listen to the women who are managing the shelves or the cash register or anything like that, and the banter that goes on between them all day long is so useless. And you have to listen to that, and you can no longer talk about things that have value, which you can at home. One of the things that we do at home, especially in homeschooling, is talk about things we have read and things of value. I know there were some winters where we didn't always feel good, and we couldn't do too much, so we watched all of Wives and Daughters, or we'd do a marathon of all the Jane Austen, or a marathon of all the Dickens movies we had, but we discussed it all. We observed things. You can't have this at work, because many of these people do not have the same background as you, and if they don't have the same background as you, they look at you as though they need to worldlyize you, to corrupt you a little bit and tell you about the world, introduce you to their movies and literature. And so also I have taught for years and years in this blog that you begin your day by dressing well. And so the question I have is, if you get a job someone's offered you, most of the time I don't think girls at home, especially the homeschool girls, grew up wanting to, when I grow up, I want to go out and work for this person, that person. It gets offered to them, and they feel flattered. They feel like, oh, must be a message. It must be a destiny. But what will you be wearing? Most of the time, in whatever there is out there for employment, for the young men and the young women, is the same outfit. There'll be a cap with the emblem of the company on it. There'll be a shirt they have to wear that has the emblem on and it's the very same look as the men, just a different size. They'll be wearing the same black jeans and the same kind of shoes, and they'll carry their They'll have a tag on it, name tag on it, and it's all alike. It's not an expression of individuality. So you're not going to be able to shine or use your talents in a place like that. And, we're probably all going to be replaced by robots anyway. But it becomes very robotic, is what I'm trying to say, and meaningless. So what will you be wearing, and how will you dress? Will it bring out your femininity? Remember, I read a verse from 1 Timothy 5:14, which talked about let the young keep house. And the young meant, the young was feminine, and it meant young women. Let the young women, the females, keep house. And I wonder, just how do you, have you learned at home yet the difference between masculinity and femininity? Not just in dress, but in speaking and in moving and in conversation and in interests and in your demeanor and your manners and your and many other things. There's many differences between masculine and feminine, but it's all the same when you go to work outside the home. And so many of these jobs, I think, in order to balance the employment problem in our countries, we need to let the men have priority over the jobs. And as I said before, in some of the old books like Our Mutual Friend by Charles Dickens, even a secretary was a man. And you'd be hard pressed to find characters in any of those books, female characters who actually worked a job outside the home. And the same with Wives and Daughters and all of Jane Austen. And even in the Bible, you go through, and if you've ever, I don't have my list with me, but there were women in the Bible, and you can go and find them and ask the question, okay, what did they do? That word is do. What did they do? Well, Adam's wife. You think she was working at McDonald's? What about Noah's wife? She must have been taking care of him. And the 3 sons and their 3 wives that entered the ark, what do you think they did? Probably some form of home-based work. I mean, I'm sure they were busy. And Abraham's wife, Sarah. And what about Isaac's wife, Rebecca? Remember her? And what do you think she was doing? And then someone will bring up about the women that followed Jesus, that if they were keeping house, they wouldn't have been able to follow Jesus. But what you got to realize when it talks about someone following someone back in those days, it was the same as during wars back in the old days. The women sometimes would follow their son or husband and then prepare food for them or take care of their other needs, laundry and other things, comforts of home. And and Priscilla and Aquila, they'll say, well, Priscilla wasn't home keeping house, or, if she had been home doing housekeeping, she wouldn't have been able to minister along with her husband. She may have been taking care of him while he was ministering. Of course, yes, she was doing a certain amount of co-teaching, but there are people on the web that will go through and label all these women that are mentioned in the scriptures and say they weren't homemakers, but you don't know that. Just because they were mentioned does not mean that they weren't. And so then there's Jacob's wife. And let's just go on. What do you think they were doing? So I have some more here. Ruth. Everyone goes to Ruth and say, oh, she was providing for her mother-in-law. She was providing for her family. She wasn't. The farmers provided for her in the form of gleaning. They would cut and drop some grain, and that was for the widows, so that the widows wouldn't have to be out working. This was provided for them. So she just picked up the stuff and took it home. And Then there are many other things here. There was the wealthy woman who fixed the guest room for the prophet Elisha, the one that he, in order to show his gratefulness to her, provided her the oil that never emptied. And they will make a working woman of her, saying she had an inn and she rented out a room to him, and not admit that she was a homemaker. And so there are so many. What about all the wives of the men that left Goshen and traveled across the Red Sea and into the wilderness for 40 years? What were they doing? Of course, they would have been taking care of their families. Homemaking. Nowadays, if you say taking care of my family, the world interprets that as making money for them. Now, what about the mother of Jesus, Mary? What do you think she was doing? And what do you think about, there was another one, Dorcas or Tabitha? You know, the one that when she died, people cried and brought the garments she had made for them. And they will turn her into one of these career type women, but she was at home. And the other one was the Proverbs 31 woman. Everybody just loves to make a real estate agent out of her. But they missed the whole story there of all the things that she did that were very, very domestic at home. She sewed and she handled food and she managed her home. And one of the ladies that wrote some things about all these so-called career women in the Bible said that they did not have to be at home and be homemakers because they all had servants, and she could guarantee you that every one of these women had servants, and therefore they could go out to work and let the servants do the homemaking. That I don't believe that that's quite accurate. Okay, so Mary and Lazarus' sisters preparing the meal for Jesus. I think that was Mary and Martha at home. And let's see, there were other people. It was the mother and grandmother of Timothy. And the Apostle Paul said to him, I know you have learned your faith from your mother and your grandmother. And so they must have been at home with young Timothy to teach him. And so you could go through and find thousands more that were home. And they will bring out, the feminists will bring out someone like Deborah, the judge. And everybody just goes crazy. Oh, Deborah was a judge. Yes, she was out working and she was a feminist like the rest of us. But it said she sat under a tree and made judgments. People came to her. But a lot of times people will be referred to as a this or a that, and it's also part of identifying her instead of a whole bunch of other people with the same name, like Simon the Tanner, Alexander the Coppersmith. It wasn't teaching everybody go out and be a tanner or a coppersmith. It was identifying them, and then the main story was what they had done with their faith. And so you can always identify it, but we have this wonderful thing called with our diaries, our grandmother's diaries, the history. Linda Lichter wrote the book Simple Social Graces and showed how in families the daughters were trained at their mother's elbow to make food taste good and to sew and to make a home, and even learned how to arrange and decorate a home. And they couldn't have done that had they been taken away right away into other people's workplaces. And we're supposed to be minding our own business, not the business of other people. And so I wanted to go back to this awful conversation. You're going to be subjected to coworker talk, and those of you who are vital can back me up on that. it is so silly. Even in a church sometimes, you'll be sitting there at a church dinner, and the talk that goes on is just so trivial. You would think they would have something deeper to talk about. I'm talking about with women. And so even if you are working amongst men and women, you're going to be subjected to a lot of talk that doesn't have very deep of a meaning, because they're trying to just run a business. And so how will you behave, and how will you dress, and where can you best do that? At home. The home will provide all of the experience and character training that you need for life and godliness, and for your knowledge of Christ and your knowledge of Scripture. And they can't do that at the working place. But you might say, well, the person that offered me my job, she's a Christian, but maybe she's not a homeschooler. Well, if she had been a true Titus 2 woman, and let's remember, in my opinion, in my observation, the law of Christ is the one that we're under right now spiritually, and that is contained in his last will and testament, the New Testament. And the Titus 2 woman and the 1 Timothy 5:14 woman and others in the New Testament are what we should be thinking about as far as example. People like to dig up the Old Testament and go into other women that were probably an exception to the rule, and will say, oh, well, she did this or she did that, and let's do that. And there's two types of thinking, and I have been ridiculed for this over the years, but I learned this at a very early age. So girls, you at home, there are two types of thinking. And so when I told you that I went back into history and I saw it with our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers, that there's inductive reasoning and there's deductive reasoning. And you can say, well, around this culture, all the girls go out at 17 or 18, or as soon as they get their license and they get a job. And my friends, they're all members of the church. They seem to be doing okay, and their mothers let them go to work, and they seem to be doing okay. Therefore, it's okay for me to do that. That would be inductive reasoning. My aunt was not my aunt was a drinker, and it didn't affect her, and she died a pretty wealthy woman, and she had a very stable family. Therefore, it's okay for me to take a drink. That's inductive reasoning. That's just applying it according to yourself and your own experience, or your aunt, or whoever. I'm trying to think of a more clever way to say this. I used to know lots of illustrations. But deductive reasoning is, from Scripture, is it wise? Is it good? Is it pure? Is it lovely? Does it have a good influence? Is it a teaching? Does it teach the right thing? Does it enrich? Does it make you healthier mentally, physically, and spiritually? And so you would say, well, the Scripture says to think on things that are good and lovely, and the Scripture says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness. Therefore, what these other people are doing with their partying and stuff, it doesn't line up with this, and therefore I can't do it. And so you've got to, this is deductive reasoning. You take this and you deduce from it what should or shouldn't be done and how you should live. And of course you'd have to know some of it in order to know it. Now, the fathers sometimes don't see it this way because they've been out to work and they think that their daughters deserve to have a little hard lessons in life and go to work where they can see what is really, how grueling it is out there. I don't see that as something that they need to be doing, but fathers will also reason that way too. But that, again, is not Scripture. And the fathers will often say, well, it's an opportunity. But we don't live by opportunity. We live by faith, and we live by what it teaches in here. When it says in Titus 2 that the younger women are to be taught what is good and to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and so on. And working at home, of course, also is translated keepers at home, and guard and guide the home. And I also referred to 1 Timothy 5:14, and it was about the women being keepers at home. And to be a keeper and a guard and a guide, it's the same thing. What kind of a guard would you be if you were gone from the home 5 or 6 hours a day? That's not a very good guard, is it? Unless you're in a traveling situation with your family. So that is where it began. Girls did not go out to live on their own or to work outside the home. They went from their father's house to their husband's house if they could. And one thing that we can do is have them take over their father's office. I know as a minister's wife, we had a church bulletin that he would type up every Saturday so that it would be on the shelf. It had a little news of the church members and a little article in it. And it would tell who would be serving that day and who would be, reading the scripture and who would be leading the songs and stuff. So our daughter learned how to do that. And she learned how to make copies, and she learned how to use all the equipment to do that so that she had office experience. And I can't remember how much he gave her or whether he paid her at all, but she liked filing. She liked paperwork. She liked the printing. She liked it all. And so that took that away, and then later on, we could see that most of the things that the girls want to do could be probably done at home. So family is the place. And the family is the one with the longevity in habits and in practice and in faith. And they have tenure, they have responsibility, and they have a stick-to-itiveness. And if you as a daughter want to get out and learn something from other people, they're not going to have that same stability. You're going to work around people with very broken lives. And you may say, well, I'll be there to minister them, but no, you won't. You're just there to work and do the bidding of the employer. And if you're going to be a minister, but you can't serve two masters. You can't go out there and work for someone and then think you're going to win them all. That's not how it's going to work. Usually, they will soften you. They will wear you down. So let me ask you a question. This was a list of questions I had a long time ago that helped women who thought that they didn't have enough to do at home and that they could go out to work outside the home. And it was questions like, is your laundry done? Are your dishes done? Is your food in stock, and have you had your meals planned? And has your husband had to ask for a clean shirt lately? Are the floors swept? Have you kept up with all the family heirlooms and in those days, the albums and the pictures and the mementos, are they all sorted and put away? How about your correspondence? Is that all caught up with? Do you have regular singing time with your children or regular story time? Do you have, and it was 30 things, and it said if you can answer yes for 30 days, that you had done all that, then you'd have time to go to work. But of course, there were so many things. There were 30 things, and you could never hope to actually ever have them done 30 times that month. And it was these 30 things 30 times. And so it's the same with you girls at home that don't think that you need to stay home. If your mother can stay home, then you can stay home. You're not different just because you're, quote, not single. And someone spread that rumor many years ago, that single people could have this in-between time where they sowed their wild oats, where they went away from home, where they went to different places and stayed away from their families, and of course suffered excruciatingly. And but that's not nowhere taught in the New Testament. There isn't a single time you grow up from your family and go and start another family. And the men and the young men may probably go pursue their education and career, but the whole point is, of course, is to have stability for their future family. Not that it's not for an in-between time of fun and recklessness because you're going to be tied down soon. And that was what we were taught in our high schools back in the old days in the public high schools, that marriage is just such a tied down thing. You'll be confined, and so you might as well spend a few years just doing what you want to do, because pretty soon you'll have to settle down. And they made it look so dreary. And oh goodness, settle down. And so the world has the broad way, which is the easy way, and everybody's doing it, just means they're following the broad way. And the narrow way, which has limitations and has protection on it, is the way that we follow, which would be the way of the home. You won't find a lot of people that believe this. So, is your room clean? So this is why I want to start some of these questions. Is your room clean? Have you categorized every item that you own in your room? And do you take care of your things daily? Is your laundry caught up? Have you prepared a meal for the family lately? Do you clean up after yourself in the kitchen when you have a snack or something to eat? How have you helped out at home today? And just all these things. Have you sewn your own clothes? Do you start sewing your own clothes? And one of the reasons young girls at home don't feel they have anything to do is they don't sew. They don't sew their clothes. And that sewing can be such an absorbing, wonderful hobby. It's kind of like an anchor. And I can remember so looking forward to bringing home a new piece of fabric, washing it, which we called pre-shrinking. Wash all the sizing out of it, hang it on the line, bring it in, iron it, and get your pattern out and start cutting it. And within a day, you could have something to wear. And so, have you got your future clothes ready? Do you have aprons made? Do you ever make anything for the home? And so. So you will also ask the question, what does my mother want me to do? And like I said, fathers are sometimes lacking in the understanding of Titus 2, keepers at home, and to guide and guard the home, because they see, perhaps from talking with other liberal co-workers, they look at homemaking as somewhat inferior. And so they want their daughters out there getting all this experience, but unfortunately they're also going to get some spiritual experience that isn't good. They may even get some emotional experience that's not good for them, and it won't build. The whole experience isn't to edify or to build up like it should. And you may even say, well, she's working for a church. She's going to work in the church secretary situation. It's the same thing. Anytime you get anything where there's a group around, you're going to start having to listen to petty gossip. You're going to have to start dealing with different people's idiosyncrasies in order to get along at work, and you might even have to dumb down the way you dress so that you don't make people feel bad because you're wearing a dress. And so spiritually and mentally, this is not as healthy for you as it is at home. Have you read a good book lately? Have you helped your siblings in any of their needs? Have you tried new hairstyles? Have you tried knitting and crocheting? Have you tried writing or keeping a little journal, an art journal or something like that? And if you keep busy, you're going to find that you won't have time to think about other people's business and going to work for someone else. The world will always be after the daughters. They will always be after the girls, and maybe some of the sons. Although the boys seem to be a little bit more independent, and a lot of the young men that I knew figured out ways to work according to their own schedule and their own desires. They knew, see, they had skills. Some of them could build, some of them could fix cars, and some of them had other skills, so they could do what they wanted. If they have a skill, you can start just using it. And I remember this guy named Handy Andy or something like that. He made himself a little car, Handy Andy, in it, and he could fix things. So he would hand this little card out, and pretty soon his phone was ringing and his texts were, "Can you come out and fix something?" And they were just little things, but he charged enough money, and they were glad, people were glad to have him fix things around their house or whatever. And he took one of his siblings with him, and they fixed things or repaired things for people that couldn't do it. And so he built quite a business with that. And so also don't assume that because a woman was noted in Scripture that she was actually praised because of what she was doing in her profession or career. We know that that's not true. Now, wanting to leave the home is a failure to discern how keeping the home works. And it's good for both the body and the soul, and there's so much. You start out your day the way I told you. You get your bath and get dressed, fix your hair and face, put your apron on, make your list. And the list is usually like this. You go to the areas that are in the worst need. It's probably your kitchen. And then you if there's a meal that is urgent, you get a meal ready. And then you go work on the areas that are required for the best health of your family. That'd be your bathroom and your laundry room and your kitchen, because they're the wet areas. And then you take out the trash and you clean out your trash can. And then if you've got these little things picked up, it was called decluttering, I think they call it. Now, to me, bed making is not urgent. But I think taking care of children, keeping their clothes clean, and keeping their food nutritious, that to me is urgent. And if a child is sick, then you must tend to the child, and they must be bathed and other things, and they must be dressed. Those things are urgent. But I was never a stickler on bed making, but when they learned to make their own bed, they were free to do that if they wanted. But I didn't insist on it, because I was one of these people that like to roll the covers back and let the bed air out half of the day. And so the Titus 2 and the 1 Timothy 5:14 verses is a way to be different. It offered women of the world that came to Christ a quiet life, a protected life, where she could have peace and be creative and have her own management, where she could manage her life at home. And where she was free to, as she wanted to be, to make her family successful and prosperous, using principles of frugality and of creativity, where she could be free to do that. And all I can do is tell you what I observed when I was growing up of how the women were. They did not, of course, there were no jobs to have in those days. When you're living on homesteads out in Alaska, your biggest job is your garden in the summer and your wood in the winter. And you learned how to split the kindling and bring it in, and everybody participated, but we didn't have this thing about women working. Everybody pitched in and did the best they could. And the home is where you'll have your greatest strength. And of course, leaving home weakens the family. Now, would your mother, put this in your question list, is my room clean and everything? Is my mother going to leave home and get a job? Because if she's not, then you shouldn't, because you should want to be like her. And if you go out to work then outside the home, then your time belongs to someone else, and so does practically every thought, practically everything. Your life is not your own when you get under somebody else's authority. And also, when you're at home, you get a chance to start playing grown up and making life pleasant for other people at home. What kind of wife and mother are you going to be with your own home? How will you care for your own home? The way you care for your mother's home will have a lot to do with how you will respect and care for the possessions of your own when you get gone in your own home. So, ladies, I hope this has been somewhat valuable to you, and that maybe next time we can read some more of Wives and Daughters. In the meantime, you daughters at home, immerse yourselves in the Wives and Daughters movie. Observe everything you can. We would watch them through several times a year, and the first year we'd watch to see what occupation the girls had, what places of merchandise they visited, what did the Miss Brownings do? Did they work outside the home? We see all these movies, but somehow the culture is so strong, pulling like a magnet at our daughters and sons too. And we need to think about these things more carefully. And they used to say, once you let the cows out of the pasture, it's hard to get them back in. So if you've been out and you've been working, when you come back, it's going to be a little bit different because you've been independent and you've been on your own, you've had other bosses, and it's not going to be the same type of atmosphere. But there have been success stories of young women who have come back home and done their best and helped their family, maybe their father. Some of the Hallmark movies, the old ones, used to be about career girls that never got married, that came home to look after their grandmother's pumpkin farm. And they met someone in their hometown and got married and lived on the farm. And these sound silly, but these kind of things actually do happen and are possible. And I've known over the years things like this that have happened, where people have failed at that great life they thought they were going to have out in the working world and decided to come home where they were needed and where they were greatly rewarded, maybe not so much monetarily, but to have their lives settle down. And so, ladies, I hope that all is going well with you today. And I'm really sorry about that interruption there. But I didn't want to stop. And I have a ton of notes that high that I could talk to you about. And so I hope you take it to heart. Remember, it's just my observation and my opinion. There might be exceptions, but for the most part, we want to do what we can, get as close to the model as we possibly can. And so in the meantime, till I see you again, I love you and stay close to Christ, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.